The sleek silver craft descended gracefully through the Earth's atmosphere, its engines humming with power as it glided over the bustling metropolis of Washington, D.C. Below, crowds of awestruck onlookers craned their necks skyward, murmuring in a mix of wonder and trepidation. At the forefront of the delegation that emerged from the alien vessel was John Williamson, a seasoned American diplomat handpicked by President Harrington for this historic first contact. Flanked by a team of top scientists, military advisors, and translators, Williamson strode with purpose towards the waiting limousine, determined to make a strong impression. As the caravan sped through the streets towards the White House, Williamson reviewed the dossier one last time. The Galactic Empire, as they called themselves, was a sprawling interstellar civilization that had existed for millennia. Their technology was light years beyond anything humanity had achieved, and their military might was the stuff of legends. Yet for all their power and influence, the Imperial envoys had responded to the humans' initial overtures with an air of condescension and indifference. Williamson knew that the success of this mission would hinge on his ability to bridge the vast cultural divide and convince the Imperials of humanity's worth. The motorcade pulled up to the grand columned entrance of the White House, where President Harrington and her top advisors awaited. As Williamson emerged, he was struck by the solemnity of the moment. The weight of representing all humanity in this first contact hung heavy on his shoulders. "Mr. Williamson," Harrington greeted him warmly, her eyes betraying a hint of concern. "The world is watching. I trust you'll make us proud." Williamson nodded grimly. "I'll do my best, Madam President, for the sake of us all." The American delegation was ushered inside, where they were met by three imposing figures in flowing robes of crimson and gold. Williamson recognized them as the Imperial envoys from the previous communications, Karn, Xyloth, and Vraxix. Their faces were impassive, their eyes studying the humans with a detached curiosity. After the customary introductions and pleasantries, the negotiations began in earnest. Williamson outlined humanity's desire for peaceful coexistence and the opportunity to join the galactic community as equals. He spoke of Earth's rich cultural heritage, its technological advancements, and the resilience of the human spirit. But the Imperial envoys remained unmoved, their responses clipped and dismissive. "Your kind are primitives, unfit to interact with the advanced civilizations of the Empire," Karn sneered. "You have no resources or skills that we require. Your presence in this galaxy is an unwelcome intrusion." Williamson felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain calm. "We come in peace, seeking only to learn from your wisdom and contribute to the greater good of all sentient beings. Surely there is room for mutual understanding and cooperation." Xyloth let out a harsh, grating laugh. "Understand this, human. The Galactic Empire does not negotiate. You will submit to our rule, or you will be destroyed." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Williamson glanced at his colleagues, seeing the same mixture of shock and outrage mirrored in their expressions. This was not at all how he had envisioned this first contact unfolding. President Harrington finally spoke up, her voice steely. "You cannot be serious. Humanity has no desire to be subjugated by your empire. We are a free and sovereign people, and we will not bow to your demands." Vraxix's eyes narrowed. "Then you have made your choice. The might of the Galactic Empire will crush your pathetic resistance. You have been warned." With that, the Imperial envoys turned and strode out of the room, their crimson robes billowing behind them. Williamson watched them go, his mind racing. This was no mere diplomatic setback. It was a declaration of war, a challenge that humanity could not afford to ignore. As the doors closed, the room erupted in a flurry of activity. Advisors scrambled to assess the situation, while Harrington huddled with her top generals, issuing urgent orders. Williamson felt a growing sense of dread. The Galactic Empire was a formidable foe, and the human race was woefully unprepared for the conflict that lay ahead. Yet there was also a glimmer of defiance in the air, a determination to stand firm against the arrogance and aggression of the Imperial overlords. Williamson knew that in the days and weeks to come, humanity would need to summon every ounce of its resourcefulness, innovation, and fighting spirit to have any hope of victory. The die had been cast. The first war between humanity and the Galactic Empire had begun. The news of the Imperial ultimatum spread like wildfire across the globe, sparking outrage and fear in equal measure. World leaders convened emergency sessions, military forces were placed on high alert, and the public braced for the unthinkable, a war with an extraterrestrial superpower. In the Oval Office, President Emily Harrington pored over the latest intelligence reports, her brow furrowed with concern. The assessments were dire. The Galactic Empire's military might was simply unmatched by anything humanity had ever encountered. Their ships were larger, their weapons more advanced, and their numbers seemingly limitless. We're outgunned, outmanned, and outmatched in every conceivable way, General Lisa Thompson, the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairwoman, said grimly. If they decide to attack, there's a good chance we won't be able to stop them. Harrington nodded, her jaw set with determination. That may be true, General, but we cannot simply surrender. The freedom and sovereignty of our planet are at stake. We must fight, no matter the odds. I understand your resolve, Madam President, but the risks are simply too great, the Secretary of Defense interjected. Provoking the full wrath of the Galactic Empire could mean the annihilation of our species. Perhaps we should consider conceding to their demands, at least temporarily, to buy us more time. Harrington's eyes narrowed. Absolutely not. I will not subject the people of Earth to the tyranny of the imperial regime. We have come too far as a civilization to simply roll over and accept subjugation. The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. Harrington knew she was gambling with the fate of humanity, but she also recognized that surrender was not an option. They had to find a way to fight back, against all odds. Then we must prepare for war, she declared. Mobilize our military forces, reactivate our top-secret research programs, and rally the people. We will show the Galactic Empire that humanity is not to be trifled with. In the days that followed, the world united in a way it hadn't since the great conflicts of the 20th century. Factories churned out new weapons and vehicles, scientists pushed the boundaries of technology, and citizens volunteered in droves to join the impending fight. At the forefront of this effort was Sarah Donovan, a brilliant young engineer whose work on directed energy weapons had long been shrouded in secrecy. Now, with the threat of imperial invasion looming, her innovations were fast-tracked for deployment. We've got to give our boys and girls in uniform every possible advantage, Donovan told her team, her eyes alight with determination. The fate of the entire planet rests on our shoulders. Failure is not an option. Working around the clock, Donovan and her team made rapid breakthroughs, developing a new class of plasma cannons and electromagnetic pulse missiles that could potentially overwhelm the Imperial war machines. Meanwhile, the military began training a new generation of pilots, engineers, and tacticians to utilize these cutting-edge technologies. As the world prepared for the coming conflict, a sense of foreboding and uncertainty hung in the air. Could humanity truly stand against the might of the Galactic Empire? Or was this simply the prelude to a doomed, last-ditch struggle for survival? In the United Nations chamber, the debate raged on as representatives from every nation argued passionately about the best course of action. Some advocated for an immediate, unconditional surrender, while others insisted that resistance was the only viable option. Ultimately, it was President Harrington's impassioned speech that swayed the majority. We did not come this far as a species to lay down and accept subjugation, she declared. Our ancestors fought and died for the freedoms we now enjoy. Are we to be the generation that squanders that legacy? No, we will fight, and we will win. For the sake of our children and their children after them, we must prevail against this imperial tyranny. The vote was decisive. The nations of Earth would stand united against the Galactic Empire, come what may. As the delegates cheered and applauded, Harrington's gaze hardened with steely resolve. She knew that the road ahead would be arduous, but she was determined to lead humanity to victory, no matter the cost. In the hushed quiet of her laboratory, Sarah Donovan hunched over her workbench, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. The fate of humanity rested on her shoulders, and she was determined not to let them down. For years, Donovan and her team had been refining a revolutionary new energy weapon system, one that could potentially turn the tide against the overwhelming firepower of the Galactic Empire. Now, with the looming threat of invasion, their work had taken on a new urgency. "Just a little more," Donovan murmured, her fingers deftly adjusting the delicate controls. "We've got to get this right." A sudden knock at the door startled her, and she quickly covered the prototype with a tarp before turning to face her unexpected visitor. "General Thompson," Donovan greeted the imposing military leader. "What can I do for you?" "Dr. Donovan," Thompson replied, her voice tinged with a rare note of concern. "The President needs an update on the progress of your project. Time is running short, and we need every advantage we can get." Donovan hesitated, her gaze flickering back to the hidden weapon. "I'm making good progress, General, but there are still some kinks to work out. If we rush this, it could fail catastrophically in the field." Thompson's eyes narrowed. "We don't have the luxury of time, Doctor. You know what's at stake here. The fate of our entire species hangs in the balance." Donovan nodded, her resolve hardening. "I understand, General. I'll do everything in my power to get this system ready for deployment as soon as possible." Thompson studied her for a moment, then nodded in approval. "Good. The President wants to see a demonstration within the week. Don't let us down, Doctor." As the General strode out, Donovan turned back to the prototype, her mind racing. She knew the stakes were impossibly high, but she also understood the importance of getting this right. Cutting corners could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. "All right, team," she called out, summoning her colleagues. "Let's get to work. We've got a war to win." Across the globe, a similar sense of urgency gripped the human military as they raced to prepare for the impending conflict. Factories churned out new fighter jets, tanks, and artillery pieces, while training facilities worked around the clock to churn out a new generation of highly skilled operators. General Lisa Thompson oversaw much of this effort, her strategic brilliance and unwavering leadership inspiring the troops under her command. She knew that conventional warfare alone would not be enough to prevail against the Galactic Empire, and she was determined to leverage every technological advantage at humanity's disposal. "We can't just match their numbers and firepower," she told her top officers during a planning session. "We need to outsmart them, outmaneuver them, and overwhelm them with capabilities they've never seen before." Thompson's plan called for the deployment of advanced eye-controlled defensive systems, capable of predicting and intercepting enemy attacks with lightning speed. Alongside Donovan's revolutionary energy weapons, these new technologies would form the backbone of humanity's defense against the looming imperial onslaught. As the preparations continued, a growing sense of unity and purpose swept across the globe. Citizens volunteered in droves, eager to contribute to the war effort in any way they could. Factories operated around the clock, churning out the tools of war. And in the skies above, the first of a new generation of fighter pilots honed their skills, ready to take the fight to the enemy. President Harrington watched these developments with a mix of pride and trepidation. She knew that the human race was utterly outmatched in conventional terms, but she also believed in the ingenuity and resilience of her people. If anyone could defy the odds and prevail against the Galactic Empire, it would be humanity. As the week drew to a close, Donovan's team put the finishing touches on their prototype energy weapon system. The doctor herself stood before the president and her top advisors, her eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "This weapon harnesses the power of concentrated plasma bursts to devastate enemy targets," she explained, her hands gesturing animatedly. "Its range, accuracy, and destructive capability far exceed anything we've been able to deploy before." Harrington studied the weapon, her expression inscrutable. "And you're certain it's ready for field deployment?" Donovan hesitated, then nodded. As ready as it can be, Madam President. We've done extensive testing, and the results are promising. But there's always an element of risk involved with new technology like this. Harrington's gaze hardened. We don't have the luxury of caution, Doctor. The fate of our species hangs in the balance. I need to know that this weapon can give us a fighting chance against the Imperial fleet. Donovan swallowed hard, then steadied her voice. It will, Madam President. I guarantee it. Harrington nodded, then turned to the assembled military leaders. Then let's get this show on the road. General Thompson, I want these new systems deployed to our forward operating bases immediately. We've got a war to win. As the room erupted in a flurry of activity, Donovan couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension. The stakes had never been higher, and the future of humanity now rested on the untested capabilities of her creation. But she knew there was no turning back. They had to fight, no matter the cost. The skies above the frontier colony of Epsilon Prime were alive with the thunderous roar of engines as the massive Imperial fleet descended upon the unsuspecting human outpost. Vast, angular warships bristling with weapons unleashed a devastating barrage, reducing the colony's defenses to smoldering ruins within minutes. But as the Imperial commanders savored their imminent victory, a series of brilliant flashes erupted from the human forces, catching them completely off guard. Donovan's revolutionary plasma cannons lashed out with blinding intensity, slicing through the enemy vessels with terrifying precision. General Thompson watched the unfolding battle with a grim sense of satisfaction, her fingers flying across the tactical display as she coordinated the human counterattack. All units, engage the enemy with everything you've got. She barked into the comms. Show these Imperial bastards what we're made of. The human fighters surged forward, their advanced maneuvering capabilities allowing them to outmaneuver the lumbering Imperial warships. Guided by the eye-controlled defense platforms, their missiles and energy weapons found their marks time and again, whittling down the enemy's numerical advantage. For the first time in the conflict, the Imperial commanders found themselves on the defensive, their vaunted technology and tactics proving far less effective against the humans' innovative tactics and sheer tenacity. Aboard the flagship of the Imperial fleet, Admiral Vrax seethed with rage. "How is this possible?" he hissed, his clawed hands gripping the armrests of his command chair. "We were promised an easy victory." His subordinate, Captain Zylov, struggled to maintain his composure. "The humans have unexpected capabilities, my lord. Their weapons and tactics seem to have caught us off guard." Vrax's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Unacceptable. Bring in the heavy artillery. Crush these upstart apes once and for all." The order was relayed, and a new wave of massive Imperial battlecruisers entered the fray, their devastating plasma cannons and particle beam weapons unleashing a barrage that shook the very foundations of Epsilon Prime. Entire human squadrons were vaporized in the onslaught, and the colonial defenses began to crumble under the renewed assault. General Thompson gritted her teeth, her mind racing as she desperately sought a way to turn the tide. The human forces were outmatched and outgunned, but she refused to give in to despair. "All units, fall back to the secondary defense line," she commanded. "We need to regroup and hit them with everything we've got. This isn't over yet." The human fighters disengage, their retreat covered by a storm of missiles and energy blasts that forced the Imperial warships to pause their advance. Donovan's plasma cannons continued to wreak havoc, buying the battered human forces precious time to regroup and resupply. As the battle raged on, President Harrington and her advisors watched the live feed from the front lines, their faces etched with a mix of pride, fear, and determination. "They're holding their ground," Harrington murmured, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "But for how long? We need to find a way to turn the tide, or all of our preparations will have been for naught." The Secretary of Defense shook his head grimly. "The Imperial fleet is just too powerful, Madam President. Even with Donovan's new weapons, I'm not sure our forces can withstand a sustained assault. We may need to consider other options." Harrington's gaze hardened. "There are no other options, Mr. Secretary. We fight, or we die. I will not subject the people of Earth to imperial rule, not when we have come so far as a civilization." The room fell silent, the weight of the decision bearing down on all present. Somewhere, deep in the recesses of the human psyche, a spark had been lit, a glimmer of defiance that refused to be extinguished, no matter the odds. Back on the battlefield, the human forces regrouped, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that their planet and their way of life hung in the balance. Donovan's plasma cannons continued to rain devastation upon the Imperial warships, while the eye-controlled defense platforms predicted and intercepted enemy attacks with uncanny precision. Gradually, the tide began to turn once again. The human fighters, their skills honed by rigorous training, outmaneuvered and outgunned their Imperial counterparts, whittling down the enemy's numerical advantage. The Imperial commanders, frustrated by their inability to break the human lines, resorted to indiscriminate bombardment of the colonial infrastructure, but the human defenders refused to surrender. As the sun began to set over Epsilon Prime, the distant rumble of the battle could still be heard, a testament to the sheer determination and resolve of the human race. General Thompson watched the proceedings with a mix of pride and trepidation, knowing that this was only the first of many battles to come. "We've bought ourselves some time," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "But the real test is yet to come. If we can't find a way to decisively defeat the Imperial fleet, all of our sacrifices will have been for naught." The weight of that realization hung heavy in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the daunting challenge that lay ahead. But as the human forces regrouped and prepared for the next round of the fight, there was a growing sense that they were no longer the underdogs in this conflict. They had proven their worth, and they were ready to take the fight to the enemy, no matter the cost. In the aftermath of the battle for Epsilon Prime, the human forces found themselves in a precarious position. Though they had managed to repel the initial Imperial assault, the cost had been staggering. Entire squadrons of pilots had been lost, and Donovan's revolutionary plasma cannons had been pushed to their limits, depleting precious energy reserves. As the battered human ships limped back to their staging bases, General Lisa Thompson pored over the battle reports, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. She knew that the true test was yet to come. The Imperial fleet would regroup and return with overwhelming force, and the human defenders would need to be ready. "We gave them a bloody nose, that's for sure," she murmured, her gaze flickering over the tactical displays. "But they're not going to make the same mistakes twice. We need to find a way to turn the tables, or we're finished." Summoning her top strategists, Thompson began to devise a bold new plan, one that would leverage the human force's superior adaptability and innovative spirit. Key to this strategy was the ongoing work of Sarah Donovan and her team, who were racing to develop new and improved versions of the plasma cannon system. "We've got to give our pilots every possible advantage," Donovan insisted, her eyes shining with determination. "The Imperial fleet may have the numbers and the firepower, but we have the brains and the grit to outmaneuver them." Alongside the technological upgrades, Thompson initiated a comprehensive training regimen for the human pilots, pushing them to their limits and honing their skills to a razor's edge. The eye-controlled defense platforms were also fine-tuned, their response times and targeting algorithms refined to deadly precision. As the weeks passed, the human forces began to coalesce into a formidable fighting force, their confidence bolstered by the knowledge that they had already defied the Imperials' expectations. The stage was set for a decisive counteroffensive, and the human leaders were determined to seize the initiative. When the Imperial fleet finally returned, it was with a vengeance. Wave after wave of massive warships descended upon the human strongholds, raining devastation from their plasma cannons and particle beam weapons. But this time, the human defenders were ready. Donovan's upgraded plasma cannons lashed out with blinding intensity, their sustained barrages overwhelming the Imperial ship's defensive systems. The human fighters, guided by the lightning-fast AI platforms, darted and weaved through the enemy formations, unleashing a withering hail of missiles and energy blasts. General Thompson directed the battle from the command center, her hands flying across the tactical displays as she outmaneuvered the Imperial commanders at every turn. The human forces struck with pinpoint precision, targeting the enemy's weak points and exploiting their rigid tactical doctrine. Aboard the Imperial flagship, Admiral Vrax seethed with rage, his clawed hands clenching the armrests of his command chair. "How is this possible?" he growled, his eyes narrowing as he watched the human forces turn the tide of the battle. "They were supposed to be no match for us." Captain Psylocke, his face etched with a mixture of fear and disbelief, struggled to maintain his composure. "It seems the humans have developed unexpected capabilities, my lord. Their weapons, their tactics, they are adapting to our methods with alarming speed." Vrax's lips curled into a snarl. "Unacceptable. Bring in the heavy hitters. We will crush these upstart apes once and for all." The order was relayed, and a new wave of colossal Imperial dreadnoughts entered the fray, their devastating firepower capable of obliterating entire cities with a single salvo. The human forces braced for the onslaught, their nerves steeled by the knowledge that the fate of their world hung in the balance. As the dreadnoughts unleashed their apocalyptic barrage, the human defenders responded with a coordinated barrage of their own, Donovan's plasma cannons, and the AI-guided missile batteries unleashing a withering hail of fire. The air crackled with the energy of the clash, and for a moment it seemed as if the human forces might be overwhelmed. But then a series of brilliant flashes erupted from the human lines as the newly deployed hypersonic missile platforms streaked towards their targets. The Imperial dreadnoughts, caught off guard by the blistering speed and accuracy of the human weapons, found themselves unable to evade or intercept the deadly payload. One by one, the massive warships were torn apart, their hulls breached and their crews annihilated. The human pilots, emboldened by this startling turn of events, surged forward, their energy weapons and missiles carving a path of destruction through the disoriented Imperial formations. Vrax watched in horror as his vaunted fleet was systematically dismantled, his grip on the armrests tightening until his claws drew blood. "Impossible," he breathed, his voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and terror. "They were supposed to be inferior." Psylocke, his face pale, could only shake his head in stunned silence. The tide had well and truly turned, and the humans were proving themselves to be far more than the Imperial commanders had ever anticipated. As the smoke cleared over the battlefield, the human forces surveyed the wreckage with a mix of triumph and trepidation. They had won a decisive victory, but they knew that the Imperial Empire would not be deterred so easily. The true test was yet to come, and they would need to muster every ounce of their ingenuity and resolve to emerge victorious. President Harrington, watching the events unfold from the Oval Office, allowed herself a small smile. "We showed them," she murmured, her eyes shining with a newfound confidence. "And we're just getting started." The news of the human forces' successive victories against the Galactic Empire's military might had spread like wildfire through the far-flung reaches of the Imperial territories. For the first time in millennia, the vaunted might of the Imperial war machine had been brought low by an upstart civilization that had dared to defy their overlords. Panic gripped the Imperial leadership as they realized that the war they had expected to be a swift and decisive conquest was now slipping through their fingers. In a desperate gambit to salvage their crumbling dominance, the Imperial High Command ordered a massive counteroffensive to defend the heart of their civilization, the homeworld of Styloth Prime. General Lisa Thompson studied the tactical reports with a grim expression, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "They're throwing everything they've got at us," she murmured, her fingers tracing the projected flight paths of the approaching Imperial Armada. "This is going to be our biggest test yet." Beside her, Sarah Donovan nodded, her face etched with determination. "We're ready for them, General. My team has been working around the clock to upgrade our plasma cannon systems and develop new countermeasures against their heavy hitters." Thompson's lips quirked in a faint smile. "Good, Because we're going to need every advantage we can get. If we can't stop them here, there may be no stopping them at all. As the massive Imperial fleet descended upon the human staging bases, the air erupted with the deafening roar of engines and the thunderous exchange of weapons fire. Donovan's plasma cannons lashed out with devastating intensity, carving swaths through the enemy formations, while the human fighters, guided by the lightning-fast AI platforms, darted and weaved, unleashing a withering barrage of missiles and energy blasts. But the Imperial commanders had learned from their previous defeats, and this time they had brought the full might of their dreadnought fleet to bear. The colossal warships unleashed a cataclysmic barrage, their particle beam weapons and plasma cannons decimating the human defenses with ease. General Thompson gritted her teeth, her hands flying across the tactical displays as she sought to find a weakness in the enemy's assault. "Hold the line," she barked into the comm, her voice rough with the strain of battle. "We can't let them break through." The human forces fought with the desperation of those who knew that the fate of their entire civilization hung in the balance. Pilots pushed their craft to the limit, weaving through the firestorm of enemy fire, while the ground-based missile batteries unleashed volley after volley of devastating ordnance. Yet for all their efforts, the human defenders found themselves steadily pushed back, their lines crumbling under the sheer weight of the Imperial onslaught. Donovan's plasma cannons, though devastating, simply couldn't keep up with the relentless barrage from the enemy's dreadnoughts. Aboard the Imperial flagship, Admiral Vrax watched the battle unfold with a cold, triumphant smile. At last, the upstart apes will be crushed beneath the might of the Galactic Empire, he hissed, his clawed fingers gripping the armrests of his command chair. Captain Siloth, his face etched with a mixture of relief and trepidation, dared to voice a dissenting opinion. "My lord, perhaps we should consider a more measured approach. These humans have proven to be resourceful. We cannot afford to underestimate them again." Vrax's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Silence. Fool. The time for caution has passed. We will annihilate their meager forces and bring the full weight of the Empire to bear upon their wretched homeworld. There will be no mercy, no quarter, only the utter destruction of this pathetic species." The order was given, and the Imperial dreadnoughts surged forward, their devastating firepower reducing the human strongholds to smoldering ruins. General Thompson watched in horror as her forces were gradually overwhelmed, her mind racing to find a way to turn the tide. "We can't hold out much longer," she growled into the comm, her voice laced with frustration and desperation. "Madam President, we need a miracle, or we're all going to be dead." In the Oval Office, President Harrington's face was etched with a determination that belied the growing sense of dread in her heart. She knew that the fate of humanity hung by a thread, and that every option had to be considered. "Do it, General," she said, her voice firm. "Unleash the full force of our reserves. It's time to show the Galactic Empire the true extent of human ingenuity and resolve." The order was relayed, and from the human staging bases, a new wave of advanced fighter craft and heavy assault vehicles surged forward, their weapons systems primed and ready. Donovan's upgraded plasma cannons and the newly developed hypersonic missile platforms lashed out with devastating precision, carving a path of destruction through the Imperial formations. Caught off guard by the sudden, overwhelming onslaught, the Imperial dreadnoughts found themselves unable to effectively respond. Their vaunted defensive systems were overwhelmed, and one by one, the massive warships began to fall, their hulls breached, and their crews annihilated. Vrax watched in helpless fury as his carefully crafted plan crumbled around him, his clawed hands clenching the armrests of his command chair until they threatened to break. "Impossible," he roared, his voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated rage. "How can these primitives defy the might of the Galactic Empire?" Siloth, his face etched with a strange mixture of awe and fear, could only shake his head in stunned silence. The humans had pulled off the unthinkable, and in doing so, they had shattered the very foundations of the Imperial regime. As the smoke cleared over the devastated battlefield, the human forces surveyed the wreckage with a mix of triumph and trepidation. They had won a decisive victory, but they knew that the true test was yet to come. The Galactic Empire would not go down without a fight, and the final showdown was looming on the horizon. The smoking wreckage of the Imperial dreadnoughts cast long shadows across the devastated landscape of Tyloth Prime, a stark testament to the human forces' hard-won victory. As the dust settled, the victorious pilots and ground crews emerged from their shelters, their faces etched with a mix of triumph and disbelief. General Lisa Thompson strode through the rubble, her gaze sweeping over the scene with a critical eye. Though the human losses had been staggering, the sheer scale of the Imperial defeat was nothing short of monumental. The once invincible Galactic Empire had been brought low by the ingenuity and tenacity of a species they had so thoroughly underestimated. "We did it," she murmured, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Against all odds, we won." Beside her, Sarah Donovan let out a weary sigh, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. "For now, at least," she replied, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the destruction. "The Imperial leadership won't take this lightly. They'll be back, and in greater force." Thompson nodded, her expression growing somber. "I know. We've bought ourselves some time, but the true test is yet to come. We need to be ready." In the Oval Office, President Emily Harrington studied the latest reports, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. The victory at Tyloth Prime had been a resounding one, but she knew that the Galactic Empire would not simply accept defeat. They would regroup, and they would come back with a vengeance. "The Imperial fleet is in tatters," the Secretary of Defense reported, his voice tinged with a note of cautious optimism. "We've inflicted crippling losses on their military might. This could be our chance to force them to the negotiating table." Harrington shook her head, her expression grave. "That's wishful thinking, Mr. Secretary. The Galactic Empire does not negotiate. They'll see this as an unforgivable humiliation, and they'll stop at nothing to regain their dominance." The room fell silent, the weight of the decision bearing down on all present. Harrington's gaze hardened, her resolve forged in the fires of this hard-won victory. "We have no choice," she declared. "We must be prepared to finish this war on our terms." The President's words were broadcast to the world, rallying the human forces and the people of Earth alike. In the aftermath of the battle, a new sense of purpose and unity swept across the globe, as citizens volunteered in droves to support the ongoing war effort. Factories churned out a steady stream of advanced fighter craft, cutting-edge weaponry, and cutting-edge defensive systems, all of which were immediately deployed to the front lines. The human military, bolstered by the success at Tyloth Prime, redoubled its training regimen, honing the skills of its pilots and ground crews to a razor's edge. Meanwhile, Sarah Donovan and her team of scientists worked tirelessly to further refine and expand the capabilities of their revolutionary plasma cannon system. The Doctor knew that the final confrontation with the Galactic Empire was looming, and she was determined to give the human forces every possible advantage. "We can't afford to hold anything back," she told her colleagues, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "The fate of our species is at stake. We need to push the limits of what's possible, no matter the cost." As the weeks turned into months, the human forces continued to prepare, their resolve hardening with each passing day. The Galactic Empire, having suffered a devastating blow to its military might, had retreated to lick its wounds, but the human leaders knew that this was only a temporary respite. Then the moment of reckoning arrived. A massive Imperial armada, its ships bristling with upgraded weapons and defenses, descended upon the human strongholds, intent on a final, decisive confrontation. President Harrington stood before the world, her voice steady and unwavering. "The Galactic Empire has issued its final ultimatum. Surrender or be annihilated. But we will not back down. We have fought too hard, sacrificed too much, to give in to their tyranny. Today we stand united, ready to defend our freedom and our way of life, no matter the cost." The battle that followed was a titanic clash, a clash that would decide the fate of the entire galaxy. The human forces, led by General Thompson and armed with Donovan's cutting-edge weaponry, fought with a ferocity born of desperation and a determination to preserve their hard-won independence. For every Imperial warship that fell, two more seemed to take its place, their firepower and numbers overwhelming the human defenders. The skies above the human homeworld burned with the fury of the conflict, as both sides refused to yield. And then, just when all seemed lost, a series of brilliant flashes erupted from the human lines, as Donovan's latest innovation, a network of advanced, AI-controlled defensive platforms, sprang into action. The Imperial Armada, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, found itself unable to effectively respond, its ships torn apart by the relentless barrage of plasma bolts and hypersonic missiles. Vrax, the despised admiral of the Imperial fleet, watched in helpless rage as his carefully crafted plan crumbled around him. "Impossible," he roared, his voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and sheer terror. "How can these insignificant creatures defy the might of the Galactic Empire?" Psyloth, his face etched with a strange mixture of awe and resignation, could only shake his head in stunned silence. The humans had done the unthinkable, and in doing so, they had shattered the very foundations of the Imperial regime. As the smoke cleared and the last of the Imperial warships retreated, the human forces stood victorious, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they had secured their freedom. The Galactic Empire had been defeated, and a new era was dawning. An era in which humanity would take its rightful place among the stars, ready to forge its own destiny. In the aftermath of the decisive victory over the Galactic Empire, the people of Earth found themselves thrust into a new and unfamiliar reality. The once unthinkable had been achieved. The mighty Imperial regime, a civilization that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, had been brought low by the ingenuity and tenacity of the human race. As the smoke cleared and the dust settled, President Emily Harrington stood before the world, her expression a mixture of pride, relief, and a sober determination. "Today, we stand at the precipice of a new era," she declared, her voice resonating with a newfound authority. "The Galactic Empire has been defeated, its power broken by the unwavering spirit and resolve of the human race. But our work is far from over." Harrington's gaze swept across the crowd, her eyes meeting those of her fellow citizens with a steely resolve. "We now have the opportunity to shape the future of this galaxy, to forge a new order founded on the principles of freedom, justice, and cooperation. This is a responsibility we cannot take lightly." In the weeks and months that followed, the human forces set about the daunting task of rebuilding the shattered Imperial infrastructure, their efforts guided by a newfound sense of purpose and unity. Sarah Donovan and her team of scientists worked tirelessly to adapt their revolutionary technologies for the challenges of galactic-scale governance, while General Lisa Thompson oversaw the integration of the remaining Imperial worlds into the newly formed Galactic Alliance. It was a monumental undertaking, fraught with political and logistical challenges, but the human leaders were driven by a determination to create a better future for all sentient beings in the galaxy. "We can't afford to make the same mistakes as the Galactic Empire," Donovan remarked to her colleagues during one of the countless strategy sessions. "Our power must be tempered by wisdom and compassion, or we risk becoming the very thing we sought to destroy." Thompson nodded in agreement, her brow furrowed in deep thought. "Agreed. We fought too hard and sacrificed too much to simply replace one tyrannical regime with another. The Galactic Alliance must be a model of cooperation, not domination." As the reconstruction efforts progressed, the human leaders reached out to the former Imperial worlds, extending a hand of friendship and offering them a place within the newly formed alliance. To the surprise of many, the response was cautiously positive, as the once subjugated peoples recognized the opportunity to forge a new, more equitable future. "We've seen the true power of the human spirit," one former Imperial governor remarked during a diplomatic summit. "Your willingness to fight for your freedom, your ability to adapt and innovate. These are qualities we can respect, and qualities we wish to emulate. Gradually, the remaining imperial worlds were integrated into the Galactic Alliance, their economies and infrastructures rebuilt with the aid of the human forces. The once rigid hierarchy of the imperial regime gave way to a more decentralized, collaborative system, with each member world contributing its unique strengths and resources to the greater good. At the heart of this new order stood the human civilization, its influence and prestige growing with each passing day. The once underestimated upstart apes had proven themselves to be more than a match for the might of the Galactic Empire, and the galaxy at large now looked to them as beacons of hope and inspiration. "We've come so far," President Harrington mused, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond the windows of the Oval Office. "But the real challenge lies ahead. We must ensure that the sacrifices of those who fought and died for our freedom are not in vain." Harrington's words echoed the sentiments of the human populace, who had embraced their newfound role as galactic leaders with a mix of pride, humility, and a deep sense of responsibility. The path ahead would not be an easy one, but they were determined to forge a brighter future, one built on the foundations of cooperation, innovation, and a steadfast commitment to the principles of liberty and justice. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the Galactic Alliance continued to take shape, its influence spreading across the stars. The human forces, their technological prowess and strategic acumen unmatched, became the driving force behind this new era of cooperation and prosperity. And for the first time in their history, the people of Earth looked towards the cosmos with a sense of wonder and boundless possibility, knowing that the limits of their potential had been shattered, and that the future of the galaxy now rested in their hands.